Hello, everybody. Welcome to this workshop on digital platforms and domestic workers' rights. First of all, a few housekeeping rules, a few technical details. As you can see on the slides, the event will be recorded and will be made available on the organizer's social media channels. Your microphone will be muted. If you want to intervene at some point, please write your question or your comment in the Q&A button in the control bar. And I will make sure to do my best at least to take it up in the second part of the session, which will be the Q&A part. For interpretation, we also have interpretation in English, French, Italian, German, Polish, Romanian, and Spanish. You can find that also in the control bar. So please choose the language that you wish to have. If you want to make sure that you can only hear one language, then I also suggest you click on mute original audio so you don't hear two people speaking at the same time in different languages. That's quite helpful. And last but not least, if you need support, please do so via the chat box, and then we will try and do our best to help you. So that's it for the more boring side to this workshop on housekeeping rules. I think someone has stopped sharing my screen, so I'll come back to it. And now it's the more important part, which is, of course, the speakers. So maybe a few words first on what we mean by digital platforms. Well, it's quite a broad concept, but it's effectively a different type of internet and web-based virtual spaces that bring some kind of unique business model that help to exchange information, knowledge, goods, ideas, and services. A few examples, and maybe the most famous example is, Uber type services, which is will have reformed or really disrupted the taxi industry, for example, quite a lot. But I think digital platforms are much more than just Uber. There's many different ways in which to organize services. For example, there are many cooperative digital platforms, and we will hear more from that later today. So digital platforms, they really enable a broad way of organizing, or in many ways reorganizing, how sectors operate. Some of the advantages for users, and I don't like the term, but maybe in some sides for consumers, it can really help people to get access to cheaper, more flexible and quicker services, at least in theory and in the short term. Some of the downsides maybe for users and consumers: what about quality checks? What about insurances? What about who is responsible if something goes wrong? When we're talking about domestic work, for example, a lot of domestic work have workers, they work for and with people who may be in certain vulnerable situations. They may come themselves in some vulnerable situations. So how can we make sure that everyone is protected in the right way, and how we can make sure that the quality of the service, in particular when we're talking about care, for example, care type services, quality is really crucial there, because it's really about lives. How can we make sure that it's done in the best possible way? For workers, there are also some benefits. For example, access to employment, in particular for people who may be discriminated against on the labor market. It also helps to, or in theory, it can help to tackle undeclared work as well. And it can also be an additional source of income for some workers. But there are also some arguments, some critics, maybe not just arguments, that digital platforms can also undermine workers' rights, their pay, their working conditions. And also by removing the employer status, or by diversifying, let's say, the employer responsibilities, it also makes social dialogue and collective bargaining far harder. And we all know that social dialogue is really crucial to improving workers' rights across the board in all sectors. So these are just a few introductory remarks about the topic, but now we can hear from the real experts, and we have four excellent speakers today who will cover these aspects in more detail. First of all, we'll hear from Adrien Gauthier, who will be speaking in French, so make sure you have interpretation on. Then we will hear from Mariam Batti from the Great Care Co-op in Ireland. Then we will hear from Dawn Gearhart through a video from the United States of America. And last but not least, we will hear from Nikolai Stoyanov, who works for the European Commission on the future of work. After the four presentations, we will have time for a Q&A, so please don't hesitate to write your questions or comments in the Q&A panel. Thank you. So if that's okay for everybody, let's start. Adrien, à vous la parole, vous avez 8 minutes.
Bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous. Je couperai ma vidéo pendant la présentation de façon à ce qu'il n'y ait pas de problème de flux. Donc, je vais vous présenter aujourd'hui ce qui se fait en France, à savoir le segment plus de 25 ans. Donc, on va pouvoir passer au slide suivant. Qu'est-ce qu'on appelle CESU? Donc, l'acronyme de chèque emploi service universel. C'est un système, une offre de service de l'URSSAF qui va permettre pour un particulier de déclarer un emploi à domicile, déclarer donc son salarié pour un certain nombre d'activités. On va voir lesquelles, donc à la fois le paiement de la rémunération, mais également le paiement des cotisations sociales. Donc, si on regarde en détail dans le slide suivant, je vous ai mis quelques chiffres. Ça concerne à peu près 600 000 salariés qui sont déclarés chaque mois dans ce dispositif et donc qui vont s'ouvrir des droits sociaux par rapport à leur travail auprès des particuliers et à travers cette déclaration. Et c'est un peu moins de 2 millions de particuliers employeurs qui utilisent ce dispositif chaque année en France. Il réalise à peu près 20 millions de déclarations avec massivement l'utilisation d'Internet. J'y reviendrai. L'URSSAF met à disposition un certain nombre d'employeurs. Alors, dans le slide suivant, vous allez voir les activités qui sont proposées dans cette offre de service. Donc, au CESU, on peut réaliser 21 activités, aussi bien des activités d'entretien de la maison, le ménage, le repassage, mais également tout ce qui concerne le babysitting, l'accompagnement, l'aide aux devoirs pour les jeunes enfants, tout ce qu'on appelle les petits travaux de jardinage, de bricolage. Bien évidemment, l'accompagnement des personnes en perte d'autonomie, donc de soutien et d'accompagnement à domicile pour la préparation des repas. Mais au-delà de ces activités, on a la possibilité aussi, avec le CESU, de déclarer des activités qui se passent en dehors du domicile. Par exemple, un salarié qui va faire les courses pour son employeur pour préparer les repas. Par exemple, le portage du linge à domicile ou encore le déplacement et les transports des utilisateurs pour des courses ou des rendez-vous médicaux. Ce sont des activités qui peuvent être déclarées pour l'employeur à utiliser ce dispositif. C'est dans ce qu'on va voir dans le slide suivant. On est dans une offre de simplification. Donc, la déclaration va être réalisée en quelques clics à partir du site cesu.ursaf.fr. Il n'a pas à s'occuper de calculs complexes, de taux de cotisation, c'est le CESU qui va s'occuper de ces démarches-là. Il n'a pas à s'occuper également des congés payés, puisque le salaire est majoré au titre des congés payés. Il va être couvert si son salarié se blesse ou un accident du travail. Et puis, il a un avantage fiscal pour le coup, très intéressant, puisque sur les sommes qu'il engage, il y a 50% qui vont être remboursés par l'État l'année suivante. L'employeur a donc des avantages à utiliser ce service, mais le salarié a également des avantages. C'est ce qu'on va voir dans le slide d'après. Tout d'abord, pour le salarié, c'est évident, mais avec ce dispositif, il est déclaré et donc il ouvre des droits sociaux. Si on peut passer à l'écran suivant, s'il vous plaît. Il ouvre des droits sociaux donc, qui vont lui permettre notamment d'avoir un capital retraite, mais également d'être couvert en cas d'accident de travail ou au niveau des arrêts de travail, au niveau de l'assurance maladie. Donc, vous le voyez, c'est vraiment intéressant pour lui. Lui aussi, il va bénéficier de services en ligne, donc il va avoir accès à ces bulletins de salaire qui seront mis à disposition et qui sont réalisés par l'URSSAF et par le service CESU. On est aujourd'hui, si historiquement cette offre-là, depuis 25 ans, était une offre au départ papier avec un chéquier qui permettait de faire un chèque à son salarié et de le déclarer à travers ce qu'on appelle le volet social, un formulaire en fait, qui permettait de déclarer auprès de l'URSSAF les heures réalisées. Donc ça, c'était une innovation au démarrage de ce dispositif. On est aujourd'hui sur un dispositif, c'est le slide suivant, qui est 100% digital et donc qui permet très facilement de déclarer le salarié, de modifier sa déclaration en cas d'erreur ou en cas d'oubli, d'avoir accès également à des options, par exemple de déclarer des heures supplémentaires, de déclarer des compléments de salaire comme des primes par exemple ou des remboursements de frais de transport. Voilà, une déclaration qui est assez enrichie. Et puis, vous avez également la possibilité maintenant d'activer un service qui s'appelle le service CESU+, qui va permettre à un particulier employeur de déléguer le versement de la rémunération au CESU. Très concrètement, l'employeur fait sa déclaration, il est prélevé de l'ensemble des montants et pour le salarié, dans ce cas-là, il reçoit directement le versement, sa rémunération sur son payé, en tout cas avoir accès à l'ensemble de ses bulletins de salaire très facilement. Il peut également activer ses U+, et avoir accès à ses données personnelles. Quelques éléments donc, sur le slide suivant, sur les données de coût. Je vous ai parlé tout à l'heure de l'avantage fiscal. Combien ça coûte le CESU? Si on prend un exemple d'un employeur qui a recours à l'emploi d'un salarié pour 10 heures par mois à 14 € net de l'heure, donc avec, comme je vous le disais, les congés payés inclus. Dans ce cadre-là, forcément, le salaire versé au salarié sera de 140 €. Sur ces 140 €, eh bien, l'employeur va déclarer ce montant de rémunération. Il va payer à peu près 95 € de cotisation, soit un montant total de 235 €. Et il récupérera la moitié de cette somme sous la forme d'un crédit d'impôt. Vous voyez, c'est assez intéressant. Et aujourd'hui, l'URSSAF va plus loin avec l'administration fiscale française. Elle développe un nouveau service qui s'appelle l'avance immédiate de crédit d'impôt pour permettre aux particuliers employeurs de bénéficier de ces 50% de crédit d'impôt qui aujourd'hui sont versés une année plus tard, d'en bénéficier immédiatement donc pour les particuliers employeurs. Dernier élément sur le service CESU+, sur ce dernier slide, le slide suivant, donc ce service qui permet de déléguer la rémunération de l'employeur vers le salarié au CESU, et donc qui va permettre de simplifier plus encore et de gérer ce qu'on appelle le prélèvement à la source en France du revenu. Et donc dans ce cas-là, le CESU gère ce prélèvement à la source. Je voudrais profiter des derniers instants qui me restent pour évoquer quand même l'accompagnement mis en place en France pour les particuliers employeurs dans le cadre de la crise sanitaire. En particulier donc la mise en place d'un dispositif d'activité partielle qui a permis aux employeurs et aux salariés d'être couverts pendant la crise sanitaire alors que les salariés ne pouvaient pas intervenir au domicile de leur employeur. C'est plus de 780 000 employeurs qui ont sollicité ce dispositif et 332 000 employés à domicile qui ont bénéficié donc d'une rémunération dans ce cadre-là alors qu'ils ne pouvaient pas travailler. Ça représente un budget au niveau de l'URSSAF et du CESU de 451 millions d'euros. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci, Adrien, and thank you very much also for doing it in less than eight minutes. That's it's great. Thank you. I have many questions to come up in case there aren't any in the Q&A box, but please share your questions to make my life also easier. Thank you very much, Adrien. Very impressive system there, in particular in terms of how it can fight undeclared work. I think it's reasonably unique, but extremely interesting. Now we will move on to our second speaker, Mariam Batti from Ireland. You have 8 minutes, Mariam. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. I was just wondering, is it possible for me to share my own screen, please? The slides?
It should be possible.
Okay, because I saw someone sharing for someone. I thought that was the rule. Okay. Just give me a second to do that, please.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
Hopefully it will not take forever. So in the meantime, while I'm trying to share, let's see. There. Okay, can you see on the screen? Can you see any presentation, please?
Yes, we can see, but maybe you can make it in full screen.
Yeah.
Great, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe I'll quickly introduce myself. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Mariam Bate. I'm one of the co-founders of the Great Care Co-op, which is Ireland's first ever care-owned and care setup care cooperative, which is a non-profit and social enterprise. The picture you see on the screen there is of the 10 of us who founded the Great Care Co-op. I will be talking about, sorry, just to move things. I'll be talking about who we are, you know, the campaign, how we engage with the ILO convention on the ground, the story of us today, as well as the impact that this has had. The reason I'm doing this is that I realized that we've talked a lot about the issues, but I wanted to share with you our journey from in pursuit of decent work from where we started when I actually joined the Domestic Workers Action Group at the time 10 years ago. So a bit of context and background. So we started 10 years ago as the Domestic Workers Action Group, a group of migrant domestic workers set up initially as a support group by the Migrant Rights Centre Ireland, one of the migrant organizations here. And it was set up because at the time, domestic workers were coming in and there was no support structures in place. And then it was set up as a small support group, but it grew into this campaigning group that you see would take, you know, part in protests and support other groups. So I just want to quickly just share some pictures with you to just show you some of the activities that we took part in initially. So I arrived in Ireland 11 years ago to take up employment as a living domestic worker, childminder and housekeeper at the time. And I started work on the same day. I had just traveled from South Africa for 14 hours or at least 14 hours. My employer collected me at the airport, Dublin airport at 6 a.m. and by she arrived at, I arrived at 6 a.m. She collected me at 9. And then I started work at say about 12 that very day. So fast forward months later, I had been, you know, in situations where I was exploited. I met this group of domestic workers. This was my first part. I took part in the domestic workers group at the time. So this was a play that we took part in for 12 weeks with trained facilitators, just to get to engage the domestic workers and educate them on the ILO and its objective, the C189 and its objectives. And then there was a quilt making. This was also a 12-week process where domestic workers came together to express through craft and art just how they were feeling. As you can see a clock, you can see someone cleaning, you can see a house, you can see 24 hours, which was just basically expressing our experiences, just sewing it on a quilt for 12 weeks. We also had a lot of Sunday meetings, capacity building, building our base, and just like, because Sundays were the only days that were off a lot of the times. So we would meet and just plan and plan our work for the year. We would take part also in things like the mini marathon, the women's marathon, as a way of engaging, because as you know, people participate in different ways. So domestic workers, some might want to come to a protest, others might want to come to a fun event like this, which was also a fundraising opportunity for us. But we also did important real stuff during the 12-12 campaign, where we would go away on weekends away and just like say, okay, guys, here's the work, let's get our gloves on. So what do we want to see in terms of our engagement with the ILO Convention C189 here on the ground, and who should we be speaking to and how? And these 3 days away weekends just intense kind of planning really shaped our work, which I'm so proud to be part of. We did a lot of political participation on issue-based meetings such as housing and other issues, because we have to think of domestic workers from a point of a person as a whole and not just a worker, but person with other issues, whether it's childcare issues or housing issues. This was one of the meetings about the importance of political participation for those that have become citizens and those that could participate in local elections that are not yet citizens. And then one of the things was supporting other campaigns. For example, this was on St. Patrick's Day, the Migrant Rights Center will do something with the justice for the undocumented on being undocumented and the need for the Irish government to regularize. Thankfully, this year, our Minister for Justice announced a regularization scheme, which is the first ever since the 11 years of this campaign to get people regularized. And of course, more than half of the carers that are undocumented are actually working, more than half of the people that are undocumented are working as carers in private homes. So this is an important issue for us to support. And of course, we would sometimes let our hair down and just have a gala dinner where we would invite important people and just fundraise and thank them for supporting our work throughout the year. So these were some of the ways in which we really brought together some of the ways we engage with domestic workers, but also engage with the political representatives and all other important key stakeholders. Just quickly, I'm going to mention our successful campaigns. One of them was the criminalization of forced labor in Ireland. Just before we got the ILO ratified here, we got forced labor made a crime. This was set up again by a group of us, and half of the people in the group were domestic workers. We got the Department of Foreign Affairs to look at changing the rules on diplomatic immunity, so domestic workers working in diplomatic households are protected. We also got au pairs recognized as workers. Before, they were just seen as a cultural exchange, but now they are included in the labor laws, and that was one of the objectives of the ILO convention. And of course, the mighty ratification. We made Ireland. We made Ireland to be the 3rd EU country and the 15th in the world to ratify the ILO, because we're so creative. We would go to this was the Minister of Labour, where on Christmas, for example, would go with boxes and say, here is a present, and the present was signed petitions that we need the convention ratified in Ireland. And of course, one of the things I'm proud of, again, is this was an issue from the Irish Times that just said migrant women create Ireland's first ever carers cooperative. So 10 of us from the group that I've talked about came together. We had gotten funding from the ESF to do a migrant women social enterprise training with the Dublin City University.
Mariam, you have 1 minute left.
Oh, great. And here we were graduating from that. So this was followed by a two-year journey of setting the Great Care Co-op. Even if I've not talked too much about the Great Care Co-op, it's something that we're so proud of. We, as issues for years and years, they kept coming. We thought, what, we should set up something which would encompass both providing quality care, which we care about, but also providing quality jobs, making sure the workers have pensions. And the impact was that a lot of people got empowered from that. We have supported, we're equipped to support each other. We are also a proud example of, what a group of workers with no right or seen as vulnerable can do together. We've been recognized by Dublin City Council Awards as one of the newest social enterprise within the first 6 months of being in operation, and we're hoping to grow in future. Please do follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and engage with us, because we are going to be launching a campaign sometime next week, just really looking obviously to recruit more clients, because we've just started providing care as a social enterprise. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this with you. I'll stop sharing now. Oh, you've stopped me already.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for for that. I'm very impressive, I think, to see how you've developed and organized yourselves in such a short space of time. To see where you've come now is really very impressive. Now I will move on to our next speaker, who unfortunately can't join us, let's say, in person, because it's the middle of the night in America. But she has recorded a video for us, Dawn Gerhardt, and I think she works for, she's the Gig Economy Organizing Director from the National Domestic Workers Alliance in the USA. And I think we have a video, so maybe my colleagues can put it up. I think
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on the panel today. My name is Dawn Gerhardt. I'm the Gig Economy Organizing Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance, based in the United States. The National Domestic Workers Alliance is the voice for the United States' 2.5 million domestic workers, and we're working to bring dignity and respect to jobs in the domestic work sector, together with our partners at the International Domestic Workers Federation. We're so excited to be able to participate today in celebrating the adoption of ILO C189. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about our own internal technology platform, as well as some of the other initiatives we're working on to provide more options for domestic workers who are part of what we call the gig economy. So, as we know, domestic workers traditionally work one worker and one employer in one household. As technology has adapted and shifted over time, more and more companies have begun to intervene in domestic work. Instead of simply one domestic worker with one employer, there's now an intermediary, and very often that's a Silicon Valley tech company whose job it is to connect workers and customers in order to be able to offer services. As we've seen more and more companies come into this sector, we've taken a number of different tactics to respond. We've done legislative and policy campaigns to give domestic workers more rights. We've done our own investment strategies to try to invest in companies that are entering our sector at the outset. And we've also developed our own technology as a response. In 2019, we launched our benefits platform, ALIA. ALIA allows individual employers to contribute directly to a paid time off account for a cleaner. That means every time you go to one of your regular clients' houses as a cleaner to do a job, you have the opportunity to earn paid time off. When you'd like to request a day off, you simply log into your ALIA account and request the paid day off, and you're sent a debit card in the mail, which has about $120 or the value of 1 day of work. This is a huge innovation in and of itself, because for the first time, there's a way for domestic workers, no matter how they're finding work, regardless of their immigration status or documentation status, domestic workers can earn paid time off through this program, through ALIA, our benefits platform. At the same time, we are really excited to announce a new pilot initiative where cleaners who are using an app to find cleaning jobs will be able to earn paid time off through our platform, ALIA. Last week, we debuted the pilot project, which we think will cover about 2,000 to 4,000 cleaners over the next 2 years. The pilot is with a domestic work dispatching company called Handy. In 2019, before the pandemic, Handy was dispatching about 100,000 cleaning jobs per month. It's owned by the same company that owns others like Angie's List or Care.com. Through the pilot, we've negotiated for cleaners in the pilot states to be able to earn $15 an hour as their base pay. They earn accident insurance that covers them if they're injured on a job, as well as their lost time from that job. Workers have the opportunity to provide input directly to the company over the next 2 years, and workers earn $1.25 every hour in paid time off. The money that cleaners earn goes directly onto their ALIA account, and they have a continuous debit card that they can access to use those funds right away. The $1.25 might not seem like a lot, but if you work 40 hours a week on the platform, you'll earn more than 20 paid days off per year. If you only work 4 jobs per week, you'll still earn about 5 days or 1 week of paid time off every year. All workers deserve access to benefits, regardless of their classification and regardless of how they're finding jobs. We really hope that this is going to be a new opportunity to strengthen the status of domestic workers by providing access to the social safety net through our platform, ALIA, and through our newest pilot. In my day-to-day work as an organizer, I interact with cleaners across the country who share the value of the ability to take just 1 day off and know that they don't have to lose income. We look forward to the opportunity to expanding this pilot to more states and to providing an example of how to include domestic workers in the social safety net. Please let me know if you have questions or would like to follow up. You can find more information at www.nationaldomesticworkers.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. You can't hear me, but thank you very much for that intervention. I think to summarize the work that you do in 5 minutes is extremely impressive. And it's very, I think, always interesting to look across the pond at what's happening in America, and plenty for us to learn from, and maybe to do similar activities on our side in our own way as well on this continent. I will now move on to our last panel speaker, Nikolai Stoyanov, policy officer working on the future of work at DG Employment at the European Commission. Nikolai, the floor is yours. You have 8 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas. And thank you very much for the invitation to briefly present what the Commission is doing in the area of platform work. Let me first share my screen. And I would just start by clarifying. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Not in full screen, though. Now it's in full screen. Yeah.
Perfect. Just to clarify that I would have a broader presentation, as currently the Commission is looking into how to improve the working conditions in platform work, irrespective of the sectors.
Excuse me, Nikolai. We see a gray box on the right side. If you can minimize that, please. Usually, I think you're seeing the videos there.
Yep.
Yep.
Is it
Perfect.
better now?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. So yes, just to clarify that I will present to you what the Commission is doing to improve the working conditions in platform work generally, and not linked to any particular sector. As you might be aware, because we have announced in the work program for this year that there will be an initiative to this effect by the end of the year. If social partners decide not to negotiate, which I can come back to this, but just on this slide, a little bit of a background and setting the problem is just some figures from a very recent study that was done for DG Employment, which basically looks into the labor platform economy landscape in Europe and how has it evolved. And here, what is interesting to see is that, of course, the revenues have been growing quite substantially for the last 5 years, almost 5 times. But at the same time, the aggregate earnings have grown 2.5 times. Also, in terms of what are the different platforms active in the EU, we see that it is about a 50-50% split between platforms which originate from the EU and outside of the EU. And something which is very relevant for today's discussion, but also more generally how to improve the working conditions, is that for more than 90% of these platforms, of these people, they are formally classified as self-employed, which of course has repercussions for all the rights and benefits that they could then access. We see in terms of size, we see that 90% or more of platform work is actually on-location platform work, within which, of course, domestic services would fall. And out of this on-location platform work, home services and domestic work is about 1/3. So if it is, I mean, if you want to put a concrete number about the size of home services and domestic work in the EU, it would be about 1.9 billion euros in terms of the aggregate earnings of people working through the platforms. And of course, 90% of this work requires low and to a lesser extent medium skills, to which I will come back in a second. Here you can of course see a little bit on who are the people working through platforms generally in the EU. There were two surveys done, which found that about 11% of the youth workforce has at least once performed platform work, and there are different categories you can see here. I will not go into detail for the sake of time. Of course, people who have done this as a main job or as a secondary job or less often. And what you could see in these surveys is that people are working through platforms are generally younger than the traditional businesses. So you could see 34 years compared to 42, and more than half of them are highly educated. At the same time, if I come back to the previous slide, you see that more than 90% of the platform work services require lower and to a lesser extent medium skills, which basically speaks about a certain mismatch between what people have to offer and what they have the possibility to offer through platform work. And of course, the proportion of foreign-born respondents to this service was twice as high for people who work through platforms. Going to what the Commission is doing this here on this slide, you can see the rather exhaustive list we have identified of what are the challenges connected to platform work. And for the sake of time, I will touch upon on the first three, which would be the, of course, employment status, also issues stemming from the use of algorithms, and cross-border aspects, which are currently put forward for debate or discussion at the for European social partners to consider. And of course, when we speak about the challenges in platform work, the main challenge is, of course, the risk of misclassification of the employment status, as because it affects negatively the access of people working through platforms to existing labor rights and protections. And there is, with most people working through platforms combining features of subordination and autonomy, it is not always clear whether they should be considered as workers or self-employed, and what are the obligations that should fall on platforms. And as I said, not only people who are considered as workers have access to the full set of labor rights, such as those on working time, paid annual leave, maternity, paternity, and in general occupational safety and health, which is also a very important issue for domestic workers. And also a second challenge that we have identified is that the platform work is often managed with the help of algorithms, which brings about certain challenges that are not currently addressed in existing labor norms. And for example, this would be that algorithmic management of people providing services could enable forms of oversight and exercise levels of control that alter the traditional role of managers. So in a way, it could be that workers are managed through algorithms without the necessarily safeguards that should be available under employment relations. So we see for what are the challenges for the people from this point of view is that people may lack information and understanding how the algorithms are applied, or what are the parameters behind, but more concretely how they influence their working conditions. And of course, it might also prevent the exercise of effective rights for workers, and also prevent social dialogue and collective representation. And on cross-border, just to touch very briefly, because I'm cautious of the time, is that exercising platform work across borders can create difficulties for determining which is the applicable law, and also to the contractual obligations between the platform and the person working through it. But it also has implications for social security, for example. And there we see also that there are certain data gaps, and probably in cases lack of clarity, what are the terms and conditions that apply to these people who work through platforms, but also what is their contractual status considered by the platform, which then does not necessarily help the enforcement of possible rights from collective bodies. And this, of course, here on the slide you can see the possible areas for action that the Commission has proposed to social partners to consider, which of course are very closely connected to the challenges which identified, which would be ways to address misclassification in employment status, but possibly introducing new rights related to algorithmic management, tackling the cross-border uncertainties we discussed, but also strengthening enforcement. I would not go into detail here, but I'm happy to follow through in the Q&A section. And just where we are at the time of the process from the Commission side is right now we are currently at the second stage consultation of social partners, because social partners, of course, they have a very important role to play in employment relations, and this is recognized in the treaty provisions. And now we have put forward the analysis of the challenges that we have identified and the possible solutions that I just mentioned for the social partners to consider, because there's still the opportunity that they decide to reach a collective approach to these challenges and enter negotiations. And if this is not the case, then we are looking at a Commission proposal at the end of the year. And maybe I just stop here so that we can leave more time for discussion.
Thank you very much, Nikolai, for a clear presentation, overview, and a bit of a different perspective, broader picture of this discussion. Great. I will now go to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. There's a first question for you, Adrien, regarding the CSU. Do you also withhold trade union fees? How does that function, Adrien?
Oui, alors pour expliquer de manière très simple, il n'y a pas de contribution pour le coup directement syndicale. Il y a une contribution au dialogue social qui pourrait s'apparenter à. Il y a un certain nombre de prélèvements qui sont opérés, donc bien sûr des différents types de cotisations par rapport à l'assurance maladie, l'assurance retraite, des cotisations également liées à la formation professionnelle. Voilà, donc dans les différentes cotisations qui sont prélevées donc à la fois à l'employeur, mais également aux salariés. Il y a des cotisations patronales qui sont réglées par l'employeur et des cotisations salariales qui sont réglées par l'employeur, mais en fait qui sont déduites du salaire brut du salarié. Voilà, je ne sais pas si ça répond à la question.
Thank you very much, Adrien. Please let us know if that answered the question for you also in the chat box to the person who asked the question. I now have a question for Mariam. You answered a bit in the chat box, but I'm quite curious to know a bit more. How do you work with trade unions to support you in your process? How does that function in practice?
Yeah, we don't have, like, let's say, sort of a written down, working relationship in that sense, but because of how active we are and how the social justice is such a close-knit community in Ireland, we have, for example, at some point when one of our coordinators was going on maternity leave, the CIPTIP trade union actually paid for the coordinator was standing in for that person. But we also do training, for example, with them when we have any issues with our members. We invite the trade unions in to speak to us about that and say how we can do things, but we also get them equally involved in terms, for example, the end of the year gala dinner that I was talking about, that would usually be attended by maximum 450 people with a great number of political representatives as well. The trade unions are some of the people that we get to come to be part of the program. They have an important part. And then when it comes to negotiating workers' rights, when we have a presentation at the parliament to do, for example, we usually talk to the trade unions and ask them to support whatever we're working on, and we support them as well in their work. One of the first pictures I showed at a protest there actually was supporting the trade unions when the minimum wage was reduced in Ireland by €1. So we got organized, we got our migrants out to say we have to go out there and support our trade unions. So yeah, we have a really good working relationship with the trade unions. But Thanks if you can give some examples of how we could maybe have a kind of a more formal relationship, we would be very open to that.
Indeed. And that's an important also message, I think, to the trade unionist members who are participating here. I have a question, well, there are a few questions in the chat box for Nikolai. I'm trying to go through them now. A question regarding in Spain. Spain has recently passed legislation establishing a presumption of employee worker status for platform workers. What's the Commission's position on this? And how are you encouraging member states to learn from one another?
No, thank you. This is a very good question, because this is really a very recent national development, which we are really following with great interest, also because it not only tackles the employer worker status, but also addresses algorithmic management. What I added is a different challenge. And of course, the Commission is really looking into how to encourage member states. I can give an example. For example, last October, there was a mutual learning event between 12 member states, I think, where really platform working on the challenges were discussed, and also in this sense, how different member states are addressing them. But if I can pick up on this point, because it is relevant to the next question, basically, how do you define misclassification of employment status? And here, it is really the role of member states and courts that is most important, conscious of the competencies now at EU level, because how do you define members? How do you define member misclassification? Basically boils down to how do you define a worker, who is a worker or not. And here there are very different national traditions. There are different realities on the ground, which is within the competencies of member states, social partners within the respective traditions to really decide. There is, of course, a case law by the European Court of Justice, which puts forward certain criteria, but there is no EU definition of worker, and then there is no intention or need for it to be introduced. So this is really the role of member states. It's very important. At the same time, the Commission is looking forward to sort of providing us possibly a set of minimum rights that could be useful for member states to then apply, or social partners to then apply in the national context. Because platform work generally is a very broad phenomenon. There is different business models. There is different conditions. So just to decide the one size fits all solution would not be something which is perfect either. But here, no, the role of member states and courts is paramount in deciding who is a worker or not.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nikolai. And one maybe more question for you. I noticed in your presentation that you're in active contact and engagement with social partners. The area of domestic work is not always organized fully in terms of social partners. So how are you reaching out to, for example, domestic workers in this discussion? Because there's a danger that maybe some of those who are very actively involved in this discussion don't have a seat at the table. So how are you organizing that?
No, indeed, this is a fair point, and this is across the board, not only domestic work, but I think for platform work, collective representation is an issue. And of course, there we have been in discussion since last year with workers, representatives more broadly, platform workers associations, also with platforms, because most of them would not be under the employers organizations, no, under social. So we have been having a very broad discussion. We continue to do so, but it's just the focus or the mention of social partners consultation is there because this is also something that is more formally a treaty obligation on the Commission, which of course is very important because social partners play a very important role in employment relations. But we are conscious of the particular modalities of representation, and we have been discussing much broader than just social partners, and we would continue depending on the outcome also doing so.
Okay. I look forward to contributing to that discussion, Nikolai. Now a question for Adrien. You talked a bit about how you've digitalized the CESU platform, but what has been the impact of that on the workers and especially on the workers? Has it helped to bring more people out of undeclared work? How has it impacted the workers in your field, the digitalization process?
Alors, de plusieurs manières. La première, c'est vrai on a mené un accompagnement très fort hein, des employés et des particuliers employeurs. C'est vrai que les particuliers employeurs aujourd'hui ont massivement pris le virage numérique. C'est un petit peu moins le cas des salariés. C'est pourquoi, en plus de cette offre en ligne qui est utilisée globalement par près de 65 à 70% des salariés, on a également une offre papier, donc les salariés notamment reçoivent toujours, s'ils n'ont pas accès à Internet, leurs bulletins de salaire qui sont envoyés de manière papier directement à leur domicile. Donc c'est vrai qu'aujourd'hui, on mène cette politique d'accompagnement, à la fois de développement de nos services, mais également d'accompagner les utilisateurs dans l'utilisation de ces services-là, mais on garde aussi la possibilité pour ceux qui sont éloignés du numérique, ont des difficultés, qui ne souhaitent pas utiliser ce service-là, une possibilité d'avoir recours au dispositif avec le format papier.
Mm-hmm. Merci Adrien. Now a question for Mariam. How you talked about the recruitment process regarding the Great Care Co-op. Could you let us know a bit more about how you're reaching out, how you're recruiting more members in your cooperative? And are you using digital platforms to help you in that process?
What's the question for me? Sorry, I think I missed. Yes. Okay, if you can repeat it.
Yeah. Sorry, Mariam. You talked a bit about how you're recruiting more through your Great Care cooperative. Yeah. How are you doing that? And are you using digital technologies to help you?
The digital technology we are using at the moment is just a system. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with a system for that's an app that's used by the carers when they get to work, when to log in, for example, to request their leave days, or to log out when they they finish at the client's house. This is the only digital system we use, but of course we are online and trying to stay active. As I mentioned the campaign earlier on, we are using the hashtag how care should be, because we feel that this is how care should be provided. We will be doing a postcard campaign, a digital campaign, where people can send postcards to people that they love or they care for, which obviously lets them know of what we do. But we are also doing at the moment, this is not digital, but actually physical leafleting around the areas where we've just set up, because we have the first hub set, which is a kind of a pilot program. Hopefully we can progress and find more ways to engage people. But in terms of recruitment, we use the same kind of, I'd say digital is only during the pandemic now that all our meetings and our recruitment interviews that have been obviously on Zoom. Other than that, we don't have any other like unique system that we're using. And of course, we'll be open to ideas that anyone wants to share with us that they're using.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you see as your next big fights? What's on the agenda for you?
To grow. To grow, really. This model, we borrowed it from the Netherlands. It's called Buurtzorg in the Netherlands, which means neighborhood co. I'm sure you've heard of them. They've been mentoring us for the last 2 years, and we feel so lucky to be under their wing. But of course, this is care. They are doing it on nursing in the Netherlands. So growth, because we're new in the market, we're not very known, even if we know our intentions are good. The profit-based nursing, profit-based care agencies are out there, and they're well known. They have the big funds that we don't have. But thankfully, we just got funded by an organization called Rethink Ireland recently for the next 3 years. So that will help us at least just get some stability, because starting on a zero budget was the hardest thing. We just had a big dream, but we didn't have any budget. But we've been recognized, as I said earlier on, by the Dublin City Council. They've just given us an award in the first 6 months of being operational. We set up in June, just during the pandemic. But we had been working on this idea for the last 2 years with Buurtzorg, who are mentoring us. So yes, growth and getting more carers, and definitely just portraying that this dream that we have, where carers are valued for their work and that they are paid accordingly, they have stability, and not travel across the city to go and provide 30 minutes care here. We are recruiting carers within their neighborhood where they live, because that's important for people that are being cared for.
Yeah.
And of course for the carers in terms of cutting down transport costs and the all anxiety around traveling around, running around between 2 jobs or 3 jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Mariam, and also for highlighting the Broadsorg model. I put a link in the chat. It's quite a revolutionary in many ways, but also a very successful way of giving a bit more responsibility, more power, more ownership, more voice, exactly, to those who are doing the work on the ground, instead of let's say management type of experiences. We work also a lot with them. Thank you very much, Mariam. And maybe a last question for Nikolai. It was also in the chat box by I think by Karen Papa. You talked a bit about it, but could you maybe clarify a bit more? When do you consider platform workers as employees, and who is clarifying this? Is it just the member states, and will the Commission make a proposal to a certain extent trying to clarify this process, or is it just member states who decide?
As I said, unfortunately, it's not possible to say more than I said, because it is right now we're in the middle of the social partners consultation, so we cannot share more on content. It is rather, but since having said that, I said that the role of member states now and national traditions is very important in light of the competencies of the treaties, but also we see that there is scope that there might be a need for certain minimum floor of rights or clarification that is necessary, because this is also in a not insignificant amount of platform work. It is also performed across borders, so there is also the European dimension to be taken into account. But of course, having said that, that does not mean that we will necessarily go into who is a worker or not, because as I said, this is better done at a level closer to actually to the people.
And one more question, maybe. When we mean online platforms, digital platforms, there's such a wide diversity, and I think Dawn mentioned it in her video, is very often they're taken over by Silicon Valley type models. We also see that there's also lots of potential for other types of models in which to organize online platforms, very locally produced, locally run, maybe organized through cooperatives, with the help of trade unions, etc. What can the EU do to support those type of models too, in particular, for instance, in terms of access to finance, to make sure that the system is not dominated by big multinationals and from Silicon Valley?
This is a very, very fair point, and the study I referred to in the beginning actually sees that now the cooperative model offers very, very good solutions. At the same time, it is not as well developed as you said because of finance, but this is something that also the Commission is taking steps to address, notably through the social economy action plan, which should come at the end of the year as well. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on that, but we are of course aware of the possibilities offered by the cooperatives. We've been in touch with many different cooperatives here in Belgium, but not only, and we are looking forward how this could what are the lessons that we could draw from there, and of course access to finance, but this would not be something that is strictly speaking the focus of our initiative that I just presented.
Thank you, Nikolai. Look forward to the social economy action plan, which we've contributed to. I'm trying to see if there's maybe one last question. I think we've covered most of them. So I will now, well, first of all, thank all the speakers for joining us. Also those who did so through video. So thank you, Dawn, also. And I will then maybe share my screen for the final slide. I'm sure we will hear more about, let's say, the more political messages coming out of this event in the next sessions that we do in this conference. But now we have, I think, a short break, and so we would like to invite you to join the Wonder platform for networking and informal chat. So it's an online platform, as we've been discussing, and it really helps for you to meet people, to network, to learn more about what the speakers think and say. And please join. So we really invite you to click on the Wonder platform link that's being shared in the chat, I think, right now or very soon, and then you'll be able to basically speak and be in contact with different people, different participants, to make sure that even though we're quite far away from each other, we can still connect and really create a movement for strengthening domestic workers in our areas. Thank you very much to all the speakers again, and see you soon. Thank you.